on any committees with you, doing anything else. It is so nice to meet all of you. I'm excited to talk about the Mind Diet today. It is something that I presented on in the past. And like I said, we are going to be using Mentimeter for some interaction today. Hopefully you should be able to interact on your desktop. If you're on a desktop device, you also will be able to use your cell phone to interact as well if you prefer that. But as far as what we'll be talking about today, we're certainly going to be talking about how our brain is a very nutrition hungry organ. What does that look like? And also, how does that come into play with the brain being susceptible to oxidative stress and what we can do with our diet. So really talking about some brain healthy foods, some quote unquote brain harming foods, and also discuss some practical application. One of the things that I also like to do when I'm doing presentations, whether it is for my fellow colleagues or for our students, is I always like to let my participants know ahead of time that these slides will be made available to you. I'm actually going to be sending a PDF version to Miranda afterwards. So you will have access to those. That way you can sit back, relax, really enjoy today's information and know that you will have access to the slides and just be able to kind of be in the moment with everything that we're doing. So we are going to be using Mentimeter today. Hopefully you all can see on your screen a way for you to interact right now. But I would love for each of us to describe our diet and or diet quality in one word. We're going to do a little word cloud right now. So would love to kind of see what everybody says. And give y'all a couple moments to do that. Love the level of interaction that we're seeing right now. Oh man, you guys, I see vegetarian, unbalanced, all over the place. Really like how you consolidated that to one word. I would do the same thing too. Intentional and consistent, snacks all day. Yes. It seems like a lot of us, though, we've got unbalanced in the middle. So it seems like that is definitely a recurring theme. I appreciate the fact that this is here. And one really great thing about all of our interactive features today is that you're this is anonymous, and also too we're able to track some of the responses just in terms of some of the things that are selected, because we will have some multiple choice questions too. But okay, see a lot of unbalanced, vegetarian, erratic, convenience, carb conscious. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So with the MIND diet, some of you may already be familiar with this, but MIND stands for Mediterranean Dash Intervention for Neurodegenerative Delay. So this is truly a combination of both the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet. The DASH diet is not something that was created by the Kardashians, but instead is an acronym for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. So again, another dietary intervention that was focused on lowering blood pressure. So for many years, researchers have really examined the relationship between the foods we eat and the effects on our health. Namely, in 2015, there were researchers at Rush University, Chicago, as well as Harvard, of course, that began to really specifically examine this relationship as it relates to cognitive health and cognitive decline. So the research published in 2015 really showed that the MIND diet slows cognitive decline with aging. It was actually Dr. Martha Claire Morris and her team at Rush that looked at this with the Rush Memory and Aging Project. And so you can see here during that study, there was 923 older adults over the course of 4.5 years. And so as they're looking at the adherence to this eating style, you could see some different varying levels of lowering risk of Alzheimer's and dementia and cognitive decline in general. And so again, when we start thinking about the combination of these two eating realms, you can see here with the Mediterranean diet, very much focused on heart health and longevity. The Mediterranean diet diet is a very plant-forward eating style. So we see a lot of olive oil, fish, nuts, legumes, colorful fruits and veggies. Whereas when you pair that with that focus on having a low sodium eating style as well, there's a lot of overlap. And within that overlap, we do have the mind diet. And also, too, feel free to drop in the chat if this is something that you are familiar with, maybe already trying to implement on your own. I feel like the mind diet is something that has been discussed pretty frequently. If you've seen a lot of the US News and World Report reviews on diets, the Mind diet tends to be in the top five. Alongside the Mind diet is the Mediterranean diet as well as the DASH diet when we're thinking about diets overall. So I think that it is really great to think about that. You know, one other thing too that's not explicitly listed on here when we think about the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet is that these eating styles are also very conducive to good blood sugar control as well. So I do like to point that out. So, you know, when we're thinking about, you know, trying to incorporate these things for heart health, it's also really great to know that this is very much conducive with great blood sugar control too. So let's talk about our brain. We may or may not realize this. This is something that I certainly share with our students when I'm doing nutrition presentations and when we're thinking about the helpfulness of snacking whenever we're doing those long study sessions. But our brain is a very hungry organ. It's actually one of our body's hungriest organs, and it uses more energy than any other organ. So up to 20% of calories. And when we think about what our brain essentially runs off of the most effectively, that's going to be glucose, aka carbohydrates. You know, we eat this goes to those brain cells, aka neurons. And so the brain is very active. It's constantly on that treadmill, it's constantly on that elliptical, whether we are working on a report that we're doing and we're having a lot of bandwidth used for that, whether we are having to sit and watch a play and follow along with the storyline that is going through there's a lot of cognitive processes that are happening. And so I think that it is important for us to recognize that our brain is a very hungry organ. Alongside that, we do need to recognize that our brain is very sensitive to oxidative stress. And so, what oxidative stress is, it is these free radicals or unstable molecules that damage our cells. There's more free radicals in the brain that are available than antioxidants to neutralize them. And so there in the point, you know, our brain is a very hungry organ for antioxidants to really be able to combat that oxidative stress. And so I think that's where this conversation about how we eat comes into play. So oxidative stress, it's going to cause a lot of damage to our brain tissue. There is the theory in the field of brain disorders that the brain needs to be saved from oxidation and inflammation via antioxidants such as vitamin E, C, A, flavonoids, plant compounds, enzymes, and the brain also needs certain minerals to function at its best, such as magnesium, copper, selenium, and zinc. So as you've done your own research in terms of nutrients that are good for brain health, these are probably some minerals as well as some vitamins that you have seen in your own research as well. So as we start thinking about the antioxidants that do benefit our brain and our body as a whole, I think it's important to know that there's two kinds of antioxidants that our body uses. So first, there are the enzymes that are made by our body, and then there's the antioxidants that we get from nutrients in our food. So when we think about those antioxidants that come in the form of the enzymes that are produced by the body, this is what really kind of holds the key for preventing toxic substances from being created in the first place. And then when we think about those antioxidants that come from nutrients in our food, this is what really holds the key in terms of neutralizing those damaging consequences of oxidation, such as those free radicals. But the thing is that the brain, compared to the rest of the body, does not have at its disposal as many enzymes as the rest of our organs. And that's where we're really having to rely on getting those antioxidants we need to protect our brain from what we are eating. So I think that's why this conversation is really important today. I think that we often think about having good nutrition as it relates to our heart health or what our goals are with being physically active and lowering our blood pressure. But I don't know how many of us have really thought about how we eat affecting our cognitive performance. And again, would love for y'all to drop in the chat if you've ever made that correlation before. I know that in a previous class that I have done for WellBama, we've even talked about the correlation between sleep and nutrition, or nutrition and sleep. And then also is that connection between sleep and risk for Alzheimer's as well. So I think, again, when I'm thinking about quality of diet, especially when I'm talking to our college age population, they're usually thinking about how it affects their physical performance, how it affects their weight management goals. But I don't know if we always think about this from a cognitive perspective. This first came on my radar several years ago. So one of our newest HR and learning development team members, Corey Davis, during her time as a faculty member here several years ago, she actually had me come and do a guest lecture for her students on brain foods and brain fuel. And that's where I really kind of took a deep dive into the effects of the quality of our diet on our brain health. So I feel like that has been a really tremendous gateway with things. So not only is our brain hungry, but it is also fat. So our brain matter is 60% fat, aka lipids. Similar to the rest of the body, our brain as an organ is about 75% water. But when you take all that fluid out, you're left with brain matter, and about 60% of that brain matter is lipids, aka fat. And so it's important for us to know that fat is an essential structural component to our neurons. We need healthy fats to function properly. So facilitating better blood flow. Hello, we want to get oxygen to our brain. We also need those essential fats for improving our memory and our mood. And also, too, our neurons communicate through a signaling system that gets updated when there is a new supply chain of those fatty acids, when those are available. So again, having some high quality dietary fat sources can be really helpful. There's a lot that the body can produce on its own, but at the same time, we can really supplement that where our brain is thriving, where we do have that constant supply of good dietary fat. And we're going to talk in more detail about what that looks like. So again, as we're thinking about fat for the brain, I just mentioned earlier, the body produces pretty much all of the saturated fat it needs, but there's some fats that still need to come from the diet, namely essential polyunsaturated omega-3 and omega-6 fats. The American diet typically supplies enough omega-6 fats. And so these are the things that you're going to see from vegetable oils like sunflower oil, corn oil, soybean oil, and some seeds. But sometimes we don't get enough of those omega-3s, which come from fish, nuts, and other types of seeds as well. So the most metabolically active fat in the brain is a polyunsaturated type of fat called omega-3 DHA, docosahexaenoic acid. So this one is going to be the most metabolically active. It is so important for cognitive behavior, memory, and brain performance. Also, having high intakes of DHA has associated lower levels with risk for Alzheimer and dementia. So you're going to find this in things like fatty fish. So salmon, sardines, swordfish. I'm trying to think of some others that I've actually shared with some groups in the past. So just thinking about that. And then also when it comes to cholesterol, It's important to know that cholesterol is going to have a healthy part of our cell membranes. It does serve as the raw material for making things like progesterone, estrogen, cortisol, testosterone, and vitamin D. But I do want to say that the role of cholesterol in Alzheimer's disease isn't fully clear, but the studies have found that the higher levels of that LDL, that bad cholesterol, was linked to more plaque in the brain associated with Alzheimer's disease. So just keeping that in mind too. Okay. So as we start thinking about cognitive decline, I do want us to talk for a few moments about what exactly is cognition. And so, I think that simply put, cognition is thinking. But I think when we think about cognitive processes as a whole, we can think about processing sensory inputs as part of our cognitive processes, so sight and sound, and then reflecting on it. Also, memory, so recalling past experiences and facts. Also, problem solving, so using logic and creativity to find solutions. That's part of our cognition. And then even just social cognition, so understanding and interacting with others, and then also having that ability to apply empathy. In a situation as well. So, again, if we were to just bottle it up in one word, it would be thinking and our brain working, but there's so many different cognitive processes that we have. So when we're thinking about this concept of cognitive decline, you can see it describes a loss of cognitive abilities that occurs as part of the normal aging process. So it's good to know that this is going to be different from mild cognitive impairment, Alzheimer's disease, and dementia, which are all abnormal conditions. We're going to talk in more detail about that on the next slide. But again, when we're thinking about normal changes in our cognitive decline, essentially the normal changes that we're going to see, this could include a gradual decline in conceptual reasoning. So this can explain why, as older adults, they may tend to think more concretely than younger adults. So again, when we're thinking about that conceptual reasoning declining as we age, we may see that in some older adults in our life, also with our memory. So maybe forgetting certain facts and dates or having a hard time recalling some recently learned information, that could be considered normal as well, or maybe even processing speed. So another example I like to give with this would be a slower response to a green light while driving. So if you notice a car in front of you who maybe isn't responding as quickly to that green light as you would like them to, that could also just be part of their natural cognitive decline with the aging process. So I'm just trying to give some normal scenarios there, just so that you can see what would typically be expected as part of the normal aging process. And so I'm sure in the chat, we may have some folks that definitely have experienced that. Okay. So those are the normal conditions that we see when we think about cognitive decline. So when we're thinking about the abnormal process, so certainly that's going to include Alzheimer's disease. So a disease that causes a large number of nerve cells in the brain to die, commonly marked by memory loss, plus cognitive decline in one or more areas such as language skills, reasoning, attention, or visual perception. Whereas with dementia, that's more of an umbrella term. So this isn't necessarily going to be a specific disease, but really a group of symptoms overall. And so Alzheimer's disease and stroke can fall under this. Some of our most common symptoms with this is going to be memory loss. And then we also have mild cognitive impairment. So this is going to be a medical condition that causes people to have more memory problems than other people their age. And the signs of the MCI are not as severe as those of Alzheimer's disease. So again, when you're hearing people talk about cognitive decline, you may hear some of these things used interchangeably. And so it was always helpful for me to know that dementia was kind of that umbrella term that can be used. Also, too, when we're thinking about what the research says with Alzheimer's disease, I did want to share a few things that researchers have found that people with Alzheimer's disease have plaque buildup in amyloid protein clusters throughout the brain. So essentially, this can collect between those neurons and it disrupts that cell function. So the brain is not able to function as efficiently because we have all of this plaque buildup. And a lot of the correlation with that plaque buildup is the body, specifically the brain, undergoing a lot of oxidative stress and free radicals, those unstable cells, and us not having enough antioxidants to neutralize those. So I think that can be a really great segue as we start thinking about those brain healthy foods. So over the next few slides, I'm going to be talking about the brain healthy foods that are focused on within the mind diet, as well as brain harming foods. So we're going to talk about what these foods are, why they can be helpful or harmful. And then towards the end, I'm actually going to have a table for you, which you'll be able to access in the handouts, or you can take a screenshot today that gives the exact protocols in terms of how frequently we want to be eating these foods. What are those serving sizes? And then I also want to tell you how this eating pattern has evolved from 2015 to now in terms of some of those recommendations as additional trials have been made, and the fact that we also have newer types of foods that we have to consider over time. So, we hear terminology like ultra processed foods. That wasn't necessarily a quote unquote thing or terminology that was used in 2015. So, I'm going to talk about how that has evolved. But let me just say, don't kill the messenger on this. As a dietitian, I like to tout myself as not being the food police. There are some very specific parameters of the mind diet that were applied within the Rush memory studies. And so I'm just the messenger. I'm just letting you know. But I'm also going to talk about how we make this practical. Okay. So first off, vegetables, not a shocker, right? I would assume any top eating style is going to include vegetables. And so when we're talking about this specifically, really green leafy vegetables, as well as cruciferous vegetables. And cruciferous vegetables are going to be things like your broccoli, cauliflower, things of that nature. And so the reason why vegetables are so great is, for one, they're really great source of magnesium. So that's going to really be working on dilating those blood vessels. It boosts that blood flow to the brain. So as that blood flow is very efficient in our body and especially getting to our brain, we're getting a lot of really great oxygen exposure to those neurons. Those antioxidants are able to travel up to those neurons as well. Also, too, folate, it's going to help produce neurotransmitters for us. It reduces homocysteine levels in the body. And so I think it's good to know that past population-based studies have reported that people who best maintain their cognitive abilities ate more vegetables, especially green leafy vegetables. So green leafy vegetables are going to provide folate, vitamin E, carotenoids, flavonoids, which have all been related to lowering the risk of dementia and cognitive decline in so many different lab studies. And then also too, when researchers studied more than a decade's worth of diet records from 13,000 older women in search of links to cognitive performance, cognitive decline, and episodic memory, cruciferous vegetables such as broccoli and cauliflower were clear winners for cognitive performance. So if you have felt some kind of way about broccoli or cauliflower, you might want to think about introducing it into your diet. Now, I will say, as a dietitian, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this because I know that cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and cauliflower may not always be as great on the tummy when it comes to just stomach discomfort and the gas that is naturally produced from those vegetables. So they can be more easily digestible if they're cooked. Now, in their raw form, like that is probably most ideal situation, right? Because you've got those vegetables where they are untouched by heat and light. The vitamins and minerals within produce are very heat and light sensitive. So if we're eating them raw, great, but we can also do some light cooking to those as well. So if we're, lightly steaming those or roasting those, I think it would just be a little bit more concerning if we're cooking that vegetable so long that beautiful green color kind of morphs from a bright green to that yucky military green, and then the broccoli's all mushy. Like you don't want to cook it to a pulp, because then we are losing a lot of those antioxidant properties. But definitely don't be afraid to cook those cruciferous vegetables down a little bit so they're a little bit easier on your tummy. So that's one of those hashtag pro chip tips if you needed that. And I wanted to mention that since the Mind Diet does explicitly talk about cruciferous vegetables, and you may have even those same experiences with green leafy vegetables, so things like spinach and kale. So just taking that into consideration. Okay, next up, whole grains. This is explicitly mentioned within the Mind Diet protocol as well. The reason for this is that whole grains are a really great source of glucose, which our neurons really like. It's that preferred fuel source. And then also whole grains are going to be a really excellent source of vitamin E, which has been seen in so many studies to help protect the brain. So again, as one of those antioxidants, we see vitamin E as one of those key players. And so we also get a lot of phytochemicals and antioxidants that protects against those free radicals and that oxidative stress. And so also too, when we're thinking about whole grains, they're going to have a little bit of a higher fiber content. That's going to be really great for glucose control as well, compared to something that is a processed refined sugar. So when we are thinking about having whole grains in the diet, we're getting that fiber content, and then we're also getting all of those different antioxidants. Also, too, for any questions that come up in the chat, I will go back to those towards the end. I muted the notifications for now. Just I get distracted really easily, but I want to go back to those and hopefully we can answer some of those as we go along. But I felt like I needed to say that really quick. Okay. Nuts. I don't know how many of y'all like nuts. I think nuts are great. And so eating nuts more often is associated with less weight gain, reduced belly fat, and a lower risk for obesity. Nuts are packed with vitamin E. Again, we're talking about vitamin E. And so that's going to protect the brain from that oxidative stress. For the Mind Diet specifically, walnuts are often highlighted for their high omega-3s, but almonds, pistachios, pecans, Brazil nuts, and hazelnuts also provide some excellent sources of vitamin E. So we can change it up a bit. Whenever I've done any of my Mind Diet research from different resources, they don't typically explicitly mention peanuts per se. So I think it's safe to say that we probably want to be a little bit adventurous with our nut intake. So thinking about almonds and walnuts, even pecans. And so, if you're open to switching out from just your dry roasted peanuts and mixing in some of those other nuts, which can be expensive at times, definitely think about that because they're going to be a really great source of folate and fiber. And we'll talk about towards the end what the frequency of that nut intake is going to look like. Beans. So beans are great, really great this time of year when we're incorporating them in soups and chilies and things of that nature. And the really great thing about beans is that they have really great plant protein. So for any of my vegetarians or vegans who are participating today and we're thinking about getting adequate protein and beans happen to be your protein of choice in your vegetarian or vegan lifestyle, that's great because we're getting that protein, we're getting that fiber, we're also getting iron and potassium. And so also too, because of that built-in fiber within those beans, and because there's protein in there as well, the beans, the glucose or the carbohydrate in beans is going to be going into your bloodstream a little bit more slow and steady throughout the day. It's not going to spike your blood sugar the way that Nerds gummy clusters or a Twizzler would, because we've got that fiber content, so that's going to slow down digestion. And then also too, anytime you're eating carbohydrate that has some protein with it, whether it's all naturally together like in a bean, or if you were to eat protein separately, like having a banana plus a handful of nuts on the side, What protein does is it essentially acts like a wingman for carbohydrate, where protein is going to be slowing down digestion and it helps your body take in the glucose or the sugar from that carbohydrate food a little bit more slow and steady and even keel throughout the day. Whereas if you just ate a carbohydrate food by itself, especially one that doesn't have a lot of fiber, that can spike your blood sugar up and then give you a quick crash. Whereas protein and fiber is really going to help make sure the glucose that's within that food, that energy within that food, go into your bloodstream a little bit more slow and steady. And that can be so helpful for overall blood sugar control as well as getting glucose energy to those neurons. So when we think about diets that are high in beans, those have been shown to slow cognitive decline due to their neuroprotective qualities. So, maybe you make a habit of having a vegetable soup with a ton of beans or a chili with a lot of beans once a week this winter. Really great cost-effective protein source. Okay, berries. Berries also very popular within the Mind diet. This is something that was specifically incorporated. So multiple studies have found that adding blueberries and strawberries to diets reduces age-related declines in neural signaling and cognitive skills. It was actually, I think it was in the nursing health study that ran from 1980 to 2001. People who ate blueberries once a week or more had better cognitive function, and that made them up to 3.5 years younger than people who had half a cup or less per month. How they measure those things is always fascinating to me, but case in point, I think having some form of daily intake of berries can be really impactful. And so these can be your frozen variety as well as fresh, adding them to smoothies, mixing them in with your yogurts. And certainly having the frozen variety can make it more cost effective and you're able to eat these year round. What's really great with the food technology today is that for pretty much all frozen produce. It's flash frozen where fruit and vegetables are captured at their peak level of nutrition and they're able to flash freeze that and keep that nutritive quality intact. So I think if you're thinking, gosh, I want to eat all these things, but it's so expensive to eat them out of season or to have to eat them fresh all the time, frozen is going to be an incredible option as well. And so berries are specifically included in the Mind diet, even though fruit in general has not been. But again, as we talk about how the Mind diet has evolved over the years, I'm going to talk more about what that looks like. Okay, I'm looking at my time. I got to make sure we go through everything. Okay, animal proteins. So with our animal proteins, that is going to be a great source of DHA, that docosahexaenoic omega-3 fatty acid that I was telling y'all about, that's so essential for our brain. So that's important for cognitive behavior, memory, and brain performance. So when we think about the different animal proteins that would be ideal, you can see I specifically have poultry and seafood. So chicken is going to be a really great source of B12. So that's going to influence our mood. It's going to increase serotonin production. Low levels are correlated with depression. When we're thinking about serotonin production, we want to avoid frying. I'm going to go into fried food later, so we'll talk more detail then. But then also seafood, so direct sources of omega-3, specifically DHA. So there's that really fatty fish. So that salmon, again, sardines, things of that nature, tuna, really great sources. Olive oil. Oh my goodness, olive oil, so magical. It has so many different antioxidants, 230 antioxidants and polyphenols. These are incredible for your brain. Also, there's a component within olive oil called oleocanthal, and it's one of the hundreds of natural phenolic compounds in extra virgin olive oil with antioxidants and anti-inflammatory properties. And I'm going to share with you guys what I share with our students because a lot of our students are novice cookers. I am not going to assume that that no one here knows how to cook. So you may already know what I'm about to share with you. But just when we're thinking from a cooking perspective, when we're thinking about extra virgin olive oil and regular olive oil, you want to use regular olive oil for cooking, but use low heat due to that relatively low smoke point. Extra virgin olive oil is going to be more what I'd call like a finishing oil, and it does contain a lot of antioxidants and polyphenols that fight inflammation. And so that extra virgin olive oil is not, we don't want it at high cooking temperatures. Extra virgin olive oil is going to be great for what we're using for mixing up vinaigrettes and things like that. We're just not going to be necessarily deep frying with extra virgin olive oil. So there is a somewhat tolerable heat point for regular olive oil, but when we're thinking about like a finishing oil, extra virgin olive oil is going to be ideal when we're thinking about smoke point and what's ideal, and also keeping the integrity of the antioxidants within the olive oil. So just keep that in mind overall. And then also, hopefully, for this conversation, we might move away from any kind of deep frying. We can still doing some sautéing or some bronzing of food, but we just, again, we're going to kind of be morphing our conversation into why is frying problematic. And hopefully, if we're using more olive oil, that does kind of get us away from using that as a preferred cooking method, especially with the different technologies we have now and appliances like air fryers and things of that nature. Okay, so brain harming foods. So um, red meat, it's recommended to limit red meat to fewer than 4 times per week, which doesn't seem bad. We'll talk about what those portion sizes look like. And so the thing is, like lean red meat, it's going to provide a lot of protein and essential B vitamins, but we want to be mindful of how frequently we're eating it. And also, too, whenever we eat red meat, we tend to want to choose the higher cuts of meat because they're delicious. And, whether that be prime ribs, strip steaks, or short ribs. So if you're going for those lean sources, ideally, if we're trying to do the mind diet protocols, we're going for those lean sources and we're going to eat that less than 4 times a week. So keep that in mind. And then butter and stick margarine. It is recommended to limit butter and stick margarine to less than a tablespoon per day. So, that's going to look different for all of us depending on how heavily we utilize butter and margarine. And the reason that we want to limit that is it's high in saturated fats, also trans fats. So trans fats is what you would typically see in margarine. That's a type of what I just call lab made fat that adds some stabilization to that margarine so that it can stay solid at room temperature. Trans fats are also the reason why certain things in the vending machine or your cabinet stay as good as long as they do, which can kind of be concerning sometimes. And so when we do have that increase of those saturated fats and those trans fats, it creates a lot of oxidative stress in the brain. So we want to think about that. Okay, how do we feel about cheese? Here's another interactive question right now. Just kind of curious. Hopefully, you have your interactive panel. Do we love it? Do we think it's okay? Are we just not a fan? I'm gonna give y'all a couple of moments to chime in. Okay. I like the level of engagement here. We've got a lot of cheese fans in here. I can appreciate that. This is, clearly this is anonymous. I don't know who answered. Miranda, I'm curious. How did you answer this question?
I love cheese on just about everything, so
Yeah. Okay. Yes, it is one
definitely
of
a cheese fan.
Okay, so looks like a good majority of those who participated are saying that they enjoy some cheese. Some of us are pretty neutral about it, and then others are not a fan, and that's a-okay too. So, speaking of cheese, and I had to ask this because I don't want y'all to kill the messenger here. So, with cheese, it's recommended to limit whole fat cheese to less than one serving per week. So, um, that can be a bummer. Again, I'm just basing it and sharing what was shared from like the specific mind diet studies, but yes, less than one serving per week. We'll talk about what that serving size looks like. And really, when it comes to cheese, especially whole fat cheese, it tends to be higher in saturated fat and sodium. So these are both going to be linked to vascular issues affecting brain health. I'm trying to think of a decent low-fat cheese that's out there. I tend to only choose the whole fat ones, but cheese is something that we would have to be mindful of. But progress, not perfection, with this. So just think about that. And then pastries and sweets, and I would just say, like a lot of like your empty sugars in general. We want to recommend limiting pastries and sweets to fewer than 5 times per week. I thought that that was pretty generous when we're thinking about implementing the Mind Diet protocols from this study. So less than 5 times per week. And the reason that we would want to limit these would seem pretty obvious. Very empty calorie, high in fat, sugar. A lot of those processed sugars can also provide some free radical oxidative stress to the body as well. So that's included in there. And then fried food. So the thing about fried food, we want to limit it to less than one serving per week. I, as a dietitian, I have mixed feelings about that because from the hashtag science, I totally understand why. But also, if you were to ask me what my perfect meal is, it is a beautiful salad with lots of yummy green leafy vegetables, some walnuts on there, some feta cheese. I had one yesterday from Urban Barn Kitchen with strawberries on it, but then a side of fries too. Like if I can get somebody to share the fries with me, that's great too, because it's the best of both worlds, especially a perfectly textured fries. A McDonald's fry only has about 18 seconds of life that it's worth anything before it just does not taste great. So it's like getting that fry in its perfection plus. So this bums me out. But the reason that fried food can be problematic or is problematic is that that cooking, that modality of cooking really unstabilizes the cells in that process. So when we're thinking about that high heat, those oils, the way that really the chemical makeup of the food is literally changed and becomes unstable during that frying process is what makes fried food so concerning. So it's also, as you can see, it dilutes the nutrition in otherwise healthy foods. I told you that vitamins and minerals are very heat and light sensitive. And I mean, you're basically, throwing that stuff in the fire when you fry it. So a lot of those nutrient properties are gone when we deep fry, which is a bummer. So again, you want to think about that. What about alcohol? This is something that comes up a lot there. With what the Mind Diet initially recommended to where it is now, it's kind of shifted. But for just another interactive question, if you drink alcohol, what is your alcoholic beverage of choice? So if you would like to participate in this question, you can. Just kind of seeing where everybody lands here. Okay. I see we've kind of got folks all over the board. As a joke, I was gonna put a bushwhacker on there. I don't know how many people know what bushwhackers are, but they're not. It's not even like seasonally appropriate. I guess unless somebody's at the beach. But I was just trying to think of some other things to randomly put in there. But I was like, I'll keep it basic. Okay. So we've got some folks across the board. Seems like the majority was mixed drinks or liquor versus abstainers. And then we've got kind of a little bit of everything as far as beer, white wine, and red wines. So in regards to the Mind Diet, when we think about alcohol, so like I said, the original 2015 Mind Diet recommendations or protocol included a glass of wine a day, no more or no less. That was really interesting wording to me because it's basically saying like, you have to drink a glass of red wine. But the thing about wine most particularly red wine, is it is a very polyphenol-rich food, and it's been associated with better cognitive function in a sub-study of a larger Protein Med trial. But I think also too, there are some observational studies that suggest moderate alcohol intake reduces the risk of Alzheimer's disease, but also we have to think about what if somebody is drinking more than that. So when I was looking at some of the information related to where researchers stand on alcohol in the MIND diet now, it says that wine was included as one of the 15 original dietary components in the MIND diet score, where a moderate amount was actually helpful. But I think that some subsequent trials have actually omitted including alcohol for safety reasons, just because alcohol use can be so complex to the individual. And a lot of this is going to be unique based on someone's own personal health history, family history. So now I think just to make things a little bit more straightforward, they don't necessarily address alcohol or don't include it as one of the recommended things that you should be consuming daily. So I thought that that was really interesting. So when we're thinking about practical tips and application, this is the table that I was mentioning earlier. I really like this in regards to what the MIND diet recommendations are. If we're thinking about really wanting to have good adherence to it, and following the how many servings a day, how many per week, what do these servings look like? So you can see, whole grains to leafy greens, berries, red wine, red meat, pastries, and sweets. So you can see all of these things. But again, I know you're going to have access to these slides and these handouts. I want to jump over really quick to how all of this has evolved. So in the original 2015 recommendations, it was saying having fatty fish, one serving a week. Now, through the MIND diet trials and what we're seeing, maybe jumping that up to 2 to 3 servings a week with berries. Instead of just saying berries, we're going to say, your vegetables or your produce or your fruit items that are going to have a broader spectrum of polyphenol rich foods in general. So that could be things like cherries or grapes or plums, pomegranates, my goodness. So instead of it just being very specific to the berry family, cherries, pomegranates, all of those deeply rich colored fruits are going to be very polyphenol rich. With fiber foods, in addition to just having fiber in general, thinking a lot about your prebiotic fibers as well as probiotic foods. So things like onions, garlic, bananas. When we think about probiotics, things like kefir and kombucha. So that's kind of how things have evolved there. With leafy greens, 6 servings per week, leafy greens plus cruciferous vegetables, which we addressed earlier. Nuts, you can see with whole grains daily, making sure we're emphasizing those fiber-rich sources. And then also, quote unquote, ultra processed foods. So a lot of the products that we would see within the internal aisles of the grocery and not the perimeter, I'm trying to just minimize those as much as possible. Just with the ultra processing, yes, a lot of those can be fortified with additional nutrients, some of which are antioxidants, but you are going to be getting a lot of nutritive value that is lost, or things that are added in we don't need, as far as added sugar, salt, fat, things of that nature. And then, like I said, with the alcohol, 1 glass or less of wine per day. Now it's saying just minimize or eliminate completely, especially your APOE4 carriers, those individuals that have a higher risk of Alzheimer's. So for APOE4 carriers, alcohol consumption, even at moderate levels, may increase dementia risk and cognitive decline more significantly than non-carriers. So that's something that we want to think about. So tips for making the MIND diet cost effective. We talked a lot about different fruits and vegetables, nuts, things that can be expensive depending on where we're shopping and the time of year. But like I said, frozen produce, fantastic. Buying nuts in bulk, using both canned and dried beans can make it really affordable. I don't know if you've ever tried to do a crock pot of pintos. Don't feel like you have to have been from the South to do that and feel like you they can be amazing. If you want to know like my slow cooker, like Pinto's recipe, hit me up because I got you covered there. So great. Using packaged shelf-stable fish from pouches, so like little tuna packets can be really great. Or even thinking about buying the smaller bottles of the really good quality extra virgin olive oil can be nice because you don't want to be using too much, and you can kind of invest in the quality over the quantity. Maybe even putting some beans and some black bean brownies, blending up, blueberries or leafy greens in smoothies. If you're trying to get away from using so much red meat and adding in other types of other types of protein, you could do tofu or some pea-based protein powders as well. Um, and then when we think also about just what we want to do in addition to the way that we're eating, if you're an active smoker, quit because that provides oxidative stress to the body. Also, getting adequate sleep. So when I do my wellness class related to food and sleep, we also talk about how inadequate sleep can make us more susceptible to that plaque and amyloid protein buildup that is correlated with Alzheimer's. So getting adequate sleep, exercising daily, that's increasing that circulation, that's getting oxygen to the rest of our body, especially those neurons, and then practicing those stress reduction techniques. One of my favorite recipes, so if I were to think about a practical way to do this, this is something that I demoed when I was at a culinary workshop at University of Georgia with their teaching kitchen. These roasted chickpea and broccoli burritos. So if you were to ever do a meatless Monday, this is so good. So if you're doing a sheet pan of roasted chickpeas and broccoli and peppers, and then it's seasoned with essentially like taco seasoning, but you would be making your own here with like the cumin and the chili powder and the smoked paprika, have a little bit of soy sauce or aminos there, and then also the olive oil. Oh my gosh, putting that in a tortilla or maybe even over a bed of some brown rice, like literally so good. This recipe originally came from a cookbook called the Thug Kitchen Cookbook. Had a lot of cuss words in it that made me very uncomfortable, but thankfully it has been recycled in other places where when I tell people about it, I can give them a version that isn't so blatantly cussing. I feel more comfortable sharing it, but so magical, really great. Um, but take home points as we kind of land the plane on this. Please remember your brain needs nutrition. So, we need that glucose, we need that energy for our brain, but our brain also needs those antioxidants. It's a sensitive gal. We gotta help her out. We gotta protect her. We gotta get those antioxidants in with our diet. And just knowing that how we eat affects our cognitive health. But I want us to focus on progress, not perfection with this. I think any small changes that we can make, whether it's maybe reducing our fried food intake or trying to be a little bit more plant forward, can make it feel more realistic for us. And then over time, if you want to really hit it hardcore, you can. But I just don't want you to feel overwhelmed with the implementation. Some of my favorite resources, just like the book that Miranda's team is giving away, fantastic. These are two others that I really like. The Mind Diet for Two, I really loved with clients I've worked with in the past, whether they're cooking for themselves or it's themselves and a loved one. They kind of put some things in a practical perspective as far as cooking for two or cooking for a single person. So really fantastic. But there's also something called the Mind Diet Score that you can use to kind of see how well you are executing the diet. So a higher score is going to indicate a higher diet concordance. And so this is the scoring system here. And so along the top, you have your dietary component, and then what's worth is 0 points or a half point or 1 point. So you can kind of use this as a scorecard for yourself. And again, you will have access to this. But we have a Mind Diet shopping list that will be available in your downloads. But I want to know, as we close things out, how do you see yourself personally incorporating Mind Diet Rex in your eating style? Could it be limiting? Do you feel empowered to limit your fried food intake, eat more veggies, rethink your wine intake? What does that look like for you? And maybe you're thinking, I don't even know if I want to incorporate this, but if you would like to participate, would love to see what you have to say.
There was a lot of broken hearts over the cheese in the
I'm
chat.
so I'm in that camp too. It makes me really sad. I'm opening the chat um back up. I know. Gosh, I know. It seems like there was also feelings about the fries. Yes. More veggies, absolutely. Less cheese, limiting fried foods variety, more fish. And I think even just planning our meals a little bit better. One thing that I talk about in our intuitive eating series is think even if we're just a little bit more proactive with our hunger cues. So I am a very impulsive eater, and so I think that if you can address your hunger when it's at more of a manageable level, it's easier to strategize the quality of what you're going to be eating. Depending on where you are on campus at the time, if you let yourself get too hungry, it's really hard for us to use the nutrition knowledge that we have, including things like the Mind Diet. So I think even if your quote unquote New Year's resolution for next year is, having backup snacks to manage your hunger or having snacks that can help with hunger that are conducive to what your health goals are, that can be such a game changer. But um, I appreciate everybody's participation today. One of the things that I will say is that I am always here to answer any questions. Like I said, I'm going to be giving Miranda a PDF copy of today's slides. If there are some questions that I did not get to that are in the chat, please email me. The easiest email for me is nutrition@ua.edu. I really loved this topic. As I was scrolling through the chat, I noticed, Corey Davis, you are in here today, so I'm glad that you were able to participate and we were able to throw it back. But thank you guys so much for everything. If I get the ability or the permission to present on this again, I'm going to do a live quiz feature too, and it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be great.